Well, for me personally, I love being around people. So for me, interacting with the people was easy. Getting ideas was easy. Implementing change is hard, and we all know that.
Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Chrysler. Each episode, we talk to business leaders and subject matter experts to learn about the challenges they've overcome and the challenges they still face. You'll hear fresh insights, real talk, and get inspiration to grow your business. Hey, everybody. So excited to be welcoming Sam Goebel to the podcast today. Sam is currently the general manager with GCI Engineered Solutions, which is a manufacturing company that creates custom material handling and torque reaction systems for some of the biggest brands in the world. Sam has been implementing lean his whole career in a large family-owned company, a large multinational company, and currently in this family-owned business. So super excited to have you on the podcast today, Sam. Thanks for coming on the Everyday Business Problems podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I've been looking forward to this episode for a really long time, chatting with you about lean manufacturing and kind of all of the aspects about it. I'm curious to know, what was the start of lean for you? What got you interested in learning about and ultimately getting to the point that you're actually implementing these techniques within your role?
Well, I went to college on the basis of getting an automotive engineering degree. Part of the requirement for the school I went to is you had to get a manufacturing engineering minor. Took the first class there, and it just so happened at the time that I was there, the head of the department had been in industry for 10 years. She had come back to teach, and she had seen that the most important skills that they needed in industry at the time were lean manufacturing skills. So her classes were based around teaching all of the manufacturing engineering students the lean manufacturing principles from the baseline, 5S, how to get started, value stream mapping, all the way through how to interact with people and how to get suggestions and things like that. I took that first class in manufacturing. I had no intention of going into manufacturing. I liked it so much that I thought, I think I'm going to do this. So I ended up getting a double major in automotive engineering and manufacturing engineering technology. And my first job was with a large family-owned company. I came to interview just to get a job while my wife was finishing school. And they saw the skill set that I had in manufacturing engineering and decided, hey, we need somebody like this. So they hired me, their first manufacturing engineer, and I started to make some improvements, to do some value stream mapping, and I was hooked ever since. So I just got an opportunity with a great company right out of college, and I loved it. So I've been doing it ever since. It's my favorite part of my job. Seemed to always get pulled into some type of leadership position, but I really do enjoy making the actual improvements, work with the guys in the shop, making the improvements, working with them to find problems and working with them to find solutions and implementing solutions and seeing the look on their face like, hey, my idea actually works. It actually makes my life better. I really love it. So
Yeah, that's awesome. And what a great story. So many people kind of say that about manufacturing, well, I never really intended to get into it. And here I am all of these years later, still hooked and loving it. And, I think it's one of the most interesting things, as you kind of look towards that next generation too, just about talking about how much fun you have at your job, the things that you get to do on a day-to-day basis, and also, the types of companies that you work with. I think, that we can always do a better job kind of speaking that into that next generation that's coming up to get them excited and, hopefully get them hooked into manufacturing as well. So, yeah, I love what you said about engaging with the people that are actually doing the heavy lifting. And I think this ends up getting missed by so many different businesses that are out there, both in manufacturing and other sectors. So what was your journey like kind of in that initial, those first couple of go rounds, did you have a really easy time getting people to engage with you? Was it something that came natural to you, or was that something that you've kind of had to hone in over the course of time?
Well, for me personally, I love being around people. So for me, interacting with the people was easy. Getting ideas was easy. Implementing change is hard, and we all know that. Um, my first job out of college, I did everything by the book, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody, but that's all I knew. So I did everything by the book, went through value stream mapping, found projects, started pushing projects through. And I think the first several improvements that I made were really that they were pushing the projects through, showing people that, hey, this stuff does work and we're making your job better. And after I had a few wins, 3, 4 wins under my belt, then people started trusting me a lot more. And then the changes came easier. But I still remember some of the first times we did, for example, we did Kanban. We started with a small Kanban with a local supplier. The person who's in charge of our stock room didn't want any part of this process. It'll never work. Not going to happen. He had been there for 30 years. This is the dumbest idea ever. We implemented that change with, I think we started with 3 or 4 part numbers. We got those implemented. He used it for about 6 weeks, and then he asked, when are we going to do the rest? So that's the best. You know, I've always been of the opinion that I work with a lot of operators. Operators, 99.9% of them really want to do a good job. So if you can help them find a way to do their job more efficient, they're going to thank you for it. They have ideas, they just don't know how to implement them, how to get their point across and make you see that, hey, if we do this a little bit different, it's going to make my job easier. So working with the operators and getting those ideas and then actually implementing them, it's great for everybody. They get to see the improvement. I get to see the success on their face, and I really enjoy it. So it's tough, but once you have proven that you're listening to them and you can help them get things done, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think what you said in there, are a couple of really key points. Getting some wins, right? And trying to get those relatively quickly if you're new into this, but looking for some small victories and making sure that you celebrate those things. And the other thing that you said in there, and I think this is where, there's kind of a struggle, especially with some to your point about the Kanban, the person that was kind of fighting that change, right? At some point, with some existing companies, a lot of the people have probably thrown out suggestions. Maybe they've not articulated it the best way. Maybe there's been some resistance to accepting those ideas from a leadership perspective. And I think that turns people off, at some point, right? Like, hey, I'm talking to a brick wall here. How, like, I'm tired of trying to make these suggestions and they don't ever go anywhere. It's kind of that always, leadership never listens to me. So there's always an opportunity, I find, when you go into an organization, that if you can, kind of bridge that gap and open up those communication lines again, to your point, yeah, by and large, people don't, wake up and say, oh man, I can't wait to come up, come to the office and make a mistake today. Like, oh, I can't wait to, like, not be productive today. By and large, most people aren't doing that. They want to come in, they want to contribute, they want to be recognized for their contribution. They want to go home, and be with their family or what have you. So I love all of the things that you said in there, and I really love that example. How long, give people that are listening an idea to, so for that Kanban exercise where you had some resistance early on and then it was kind of like that switch flip, what kind of time frame did that end up taking before that person really got on board because they saw the results that you were able to achieve with just the handful of things that you were working on implementing?
Yeah, so that particular product was one that was quite frequent fills. We were issuing POs and receiving in on a weekly basis. So we got results very quickly with that particular project. And I think within a month or two, he was ready to do the rest of the part numbers with that vendor. It worked so well. It didn't take long at all. And I purposely chose something that he could see results right away, because nobody wants to implement a change and wait for a year to see results. We forget about what we're even doing, a year from now. So I always try to pick the initial projects on things that are easily seen and can be implemented quickly, and the results can be seen quickly, to try and get the buy-in from all the employees to see, hey, I'm here to help you. You guys have great ideas, so let's work together and make this place great.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So, in some of your other positions that you've held now, what's your kind of thought process or methodology when you go into a situation? Are you trying to, kind of get some excitement around the idea of lean manufacturing, continuous improvement? Have you gone and implemented any type of, continuous improvement committee or team, or, anything like that?
So my journey has been, I worked for that first company, which was a large family-owned company, and I was the first manufacturing engineer. We saw very large results in a very short period of time, and we started adding to our team. So I had, within 5 or 6 years, I had 8 manufacturing engineers working in all different areas of the facility, making improvements. And that was our sole job, was to standardize, write work instructions, and make improvements. And we did everything pretty much by the book there. I started with value stream mapping and moved on from there, working on the projects. I then moved into a large multinational company, and their improvement program was very scripted. So it was, go through these steps to make these improvements, and over in this area, go through these different steps for these improvements. So I saw the difference between the book way, and then I saw the mall, they came up with their own program. It worked well because they wanted to standardize between all their plants worldwide. And then when I started my current company, which is a small family-owned company, I decided that I'm just going to work with the guys, teach them how to see waste and how to make improvements. And we're gonna, we'll use the terms when we need to, but we're not gonna set up a program. We're not gonna set up a committee, because the guys really, I happen to work in a company. There's 20 of us in the facility. We're all male. So the guys, when I say um, the guys all had really good ideas and wanted to make improvements. And we didn't have a structured program to go through step by step. We teach them, we have a daily meeting every day. We talk about waste every single day. We talk about identifying waste every single day. And then we give them time to implement changes and make improvements. I'm there to assist them, if they have questions or if they can't figure out a way to make an improvement. So I really like the results that we have when the actual operators are making the improvements. When I worked at the large company, I was in the continuous improvement group, which is great. You can get a lot of stuff done because you're dedicated to making improvements, but there's a lot less buy-in, I've noticed, from the operators, a lot less. The operators will give you ideas, they expect you to implement them, and they may or may not work. They may or may not make the improvements that you want. Versus now, when I talk to my assemblers, for example, and they want to make a change, it's their change. They're actually physically doing the work. They, one, came up with the idea. They know which waste they're eliminating or minimizing, and they make the improvement themselves. So they really own the idea, and you get a lot better buy-in, a lot better results, I think, going about it that way versus having a dedicated continuous improvement group that tries to push changes onto other departments. I understand that that's not feasible in a lot of companies just because of the size and the scope and
Yeah.
production capabilities. But if companies can do that and dedicate time for operators to make improvements, that is a huge asset to have when operators own their improvements and actually make the changes.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I to your point, it is a challenge, especially with a larger company, that maybe has some established processes, has enough, kind of scope, scale, budget, all of those things to have a, group of people that are dedicated to it. But you also, lose a little bit of something in that, and kind of much like you said, I like the ability to be working directly with, the operators, with the leadership team, and, because that's where you get the best amount of, not just kind of, well, I guess, yeah, just the best amount of ROI with what you're working on, because they feel it, they see it. And the other thing I really love about that is it's a lot easier to kind of have the cross department conversations that I find that you need when you're really kind of knee deep in some problem solving. To drive that improvement forward, where again, in some of the larger companies, can be a little bit more of a challenge. It can be a little bit, more red tape, a little bit longer
Right.
of a process to be able to work through. So I completely agree with you there. One of the things you had mentioned to me is that you had gotten the opportunity to take a trip to Japan and learn directly from, some of the suppliers from Toyota. So I'd love to learn a little bit about, what that was like for you, how you got that opportunity to be able to do that. And if there were any kind of key takeaways for you just in that short amount of time.
Yeah, so I've had the great privilege to visit, do a Toyota facility tour in Kentucky with the LEI group. Um, Learned a lot there. I implemented a lot of things there. And a couple years after that, 2019, I got an email from LEI saying, "Hey, we're going to Japan. Want to come?" So I approached our owner. We're a family-owned business, so a single provider, and I told him, "This is what I've done since I've been to Kentucky, and these are the improvements we've made. These are the results that we've had from those improvements. To make an even bigger impact, the next step for me would be go to Japan and learn directly from Toyota." So we discussed that, and we discussed what type of things, what kind of benefit that would be for the business. Obviously, it's going to benefit me personally, but a lot of benefit to the business as well. And he agreed that, okay, let's send you over there. So I had the opportunity to go with LEI again over to Japan for a week, visit not only Lexus, we went to the Nagoya plant, which is at the time was considered the best manufacturing facility in the world. I got to visit there, and then we got to see several of the suppliers for Toyota or for Lexus that were in Japan. The thing that amazes me about Japan is the respect for people is everywhere. It's the culture over there. For example, walking up the stairs, if you don't walk on the right side when you're going up the stairs, somebody will give you a dirty look or say something to you, "Hey," because to them, you're being disrespectful for the person who's coming down the stairs. You're getting in their way. And the whole culture is like that. What we saw in the plants is the same thing. The operators really were involved in improvements. When we got plant tours at the suppliers, we didn't get the plant tour from the plant manager. The plant manager greeted us, and told us about the plant, but all the presentations on the shop floor were all done by shop floor personnel, not line leads, not team leaders. They were actually done by the operators. So you could tell that the respect that they have for the people and the ideas that they have is just tremendous. The other thing that really impressed me there is we were visiting Toyota suppliers that supplied multiple Toyota plants within Japan. One plant was doing 1 million parts a month or several million parts a month of several thousand different SKUs, running their entire facility off of paper Kanban, no electronic Kanban. To learn how that works, not having a computer system drive your production was amazing to me, because here in the US, we think that technology can solve all problems. We saw it firsthand in Japan, 3,000 part numbers and several million parts a month running 100% off of non-electronic Kanban. Amazing to see.
Yeah.
If anybody out there has a chance to visit Japan on one of the many study tours that go, I would highly recommend it. It was very worthwhile. The difference in the culture, you can see really the roots and the foundation of TPS and where it came from and why it's so successful inside of Toyota. And it's something you can't learn from a book. So
Yeah, that's amazing, man. I did the Toyota tour in Kentucky as well, and I've not had an opportunity to go over there. But yeah, I mean, just the things that you're able to see, and like you said, the respect for people, and how that comes across through their culture, through those different tours. I mean, the one thing that I'll never forget about that tour, I mean, there's a bunch of things, but one thing I always kind of use is the example of just how, dialed in, and again, because they've done it for so long, but how dialed in, during the tour they had talked about as one of the improvements that, and I don't recall exactly what they saved, but, it was down to the number of pencils in a workstation.
Mhm.
And you think that, that's just ridiculous, right? Like some people you say that example to, and people think, what are you, like, this is so ridiculous. Why would you even be talking about that? And until you kind of go through and understand, the amount of change and progress and improvements that have been made, at some point, you kind of run out, right? So it's like, that's how good they are, and it's just so fascinating and amazing to look at it and to know that at some point you could get, that dialed in with your operation, and obviously at that scale you could see, the type of return for those things. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing about that. It's definitely eye opening, and like you said, there's a lot of groups that have the ability to go and set up those tours. So if you, yeah, anybody that's listening out there, if you get the opportunity, make sure you do not miss miss out on that.
Yeah. The other thing that I find interesting, and you saw it too in Kentucky, is the amount of training they put into new employees. In Kentucky, I believe they spend 4 to 6 weeks training new employees before they put them on the shop floor. And in Japan, it's the same thing. They spend, 2 months. I can't imagine any US company that I know of besides Toyota to spend 2 months training somebody before they even let them touch a car.
Yeah.
That's just one other example of the respect that they have for their employees and the value they put on the knowledge that the employees have. It's amazing to think about coming from our background, working for the typical US company.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, right? It's yeah, most people wouldn't dream about putting that level of effort and investment into somebody new coming in. And it's kind of back to, a couple other things around that topic. It's back to the, kind of, you're going to earn respect, not get it, right? It's the mentality. Another really great example of that, I don't know if you've done much reading on the story of Zappos, the online shoe retailer.
Mm.
That's another great kind of culture study. It's an amazing story. The short version of it is when they onboard somebody, at some point during their training, they actually offer people thousands of dollars to quit, right? Because they're trying to make sure that they're not only a fit, and it's like, that's an easy test, right? And they keep ratcheting up the dollar amount to get somebody to quit, because they look at it and say, look, even though we've hired them, we've onboarded, we've spent this, investment in it, it's still less expensive to us to get them to quit now if, potentially they're not going to be a culture fit for us. So that's another really great study on that same type of thing. One of the other things you brought up in there, which I think is such a smart point, was, we kind of fall into this from a US manufacturing base that technology does solve all problems. And, to that point, how has technology kind of played a role in your lean manufacturing journey and like those efforts that you've had? And have you kind of relied on some of what you've had access to, or have you gone back to kind of, let's do it manual, let's get it done right first, and then let's look for potentially some technology to help? What's that been like for you?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of places where technology does help. For example, the company I'm working at had a paper schedule with paper prints when I started there. We made that digital, electronic, so everybody can see it. They can zoom in. That's a big thing now, is that people can zoom in on prints. So there are places where technology definitely makes things a lot easier. Um, I've always followed Toyota's lead when do it first manually or cheap, or make sure it works, test it out, test the theory. And if you find that the theory works, your improvement works, then you can always add in technology to make things more efficient or faster, or safer, whatever the case is. But after being to Japan, I am really anti-technology. To see that kind of level of Kanban without electronics, to see the level that they have of the employee suggestion systems, the level that they have of improvements that they do with no electronic tracking anywhere, it's amazing. There are definitely places, if you have a large company, MRP obviously makes a lot of sense. ERP systems make sense. Sales systems make sense. But I think not relying on technology to make the improvements, but making the improvements and then using technology to assist to make things better or easier is the way that everybody should go. You know, test your theory, make sure it works. And if it works, hey, that's great. Is there a way to make it even better? Um, we get into discussions at work all the time about should we install this new software system? And my quick response is always no. Let's try something first. And if we have to, we have to, but let's try something first.
Yeah, well, I
So,
mean, and to your point, right? Like sometimes, more times than sometimes, but you when you do prove out the ideas and you get that change implemented, more times than not, it seems like there is enough of a kind of return to the bottom line that you can now, make an easier investment in that technology. And, the other thing I kind of say is that, at least in my experience, what I see is people are focused on the technology because they think that's an easy, payback in their mind. It's a set dollar amount. It's supposed to do XYZ. And because they've not done enough work in the planning people process part of the, kind of mix, that 9 times out of 10, they're unhappy with the implementation because they've not, kind of spent enough time to do things manually, to kind of plan out, to, ensure that those changes, that technology is ultimately going to be there to be more of a safeguard, to give the people, and the process, to give those tools and support to, eliminate additional errors. So,
yeah, I was just reading a book. My owner and I were just reading a book talking about that exact same thing. Is that people? This specific book is talking about sales, helping your sales software work better. These sales companies come in and they prove to you that yes, our system can make your sales process more efficient, and it may well do that. But people don't do the work up front to make the improvements they need to allow the software to work the way it's supposed to. And I see that all the time. If you rely on the software to do it for you and don't make, like you just alluded to, don't make those improvements that you need to make, the software is just an expensive add-on that's not helping you at all.
yeah,
Yeah,
but you end up getting into that. You kind of like lulled into this false sense of like, oh, but we're doing something.
right,
We bought that, we invested in this. It's like, yeah, but you didn't fix the root cause. So
right.
what difference does it make? I mean, yeah, I totally get that. So what are some of the improvement projects, Sam, that you guys are kind of focused in on right now? What are some of the either milestones that you've hit? What are some of the maybe roadblocks that you guys are working on? Where are you guys at currently with the crew, and what are you guys working on?
Well, like most companies, we dealt with a lot of issues during the pandemic. We had some of our employees moved out of town, got married, moved out of town, whatever the case was. And because business was the way it was, we haven't replaced them. Well, now we're to the point where we're back. Our business is back to what it was pre-pandemic levels. However, we're short on staff and there's not enough people to hire. So we're focusing right now on making really focusing on the non-value added and getting those non-value activities out of our process. Um, we have a very high level, we do custom engineered equipment. So we have a very high level of staff knowledge. We don't have the ability to have somebody on an assembly line doing 30 seconds of work or 45 seconds of work. We have to have somebody that knows how to do an hour or two worth of work. So it's hard to find those people. So we're really focusing on how can we make sure that we are only doing value-added activities. So I've implemented a daily meeting. We talk about what the wastes are. We pick examples of, okay, we're seeing this in assembly. What are some ideas that we can start investigating to see, do these ideas make sense to make changes or not? We've also brought in a bunch of our outsourced work. We were having issues because everybody's so busy. We're having issues with our lead time starting to stretch because of outsourced vendors. And it's just the nature. You can't find vendors that have available time to help you, whether it's machining or welding or painting, whatever the case is. So we made a corporate decision to bring all that stuff back in. So not only are we trying to keep up with our current level of activity, now we're trying to stuff some new processes into our current building. So the guys have been great about working together. We talk about it at the morning meeting. We're going to put a paint system in this summer. What do we need to change as far as flow of our material to make sure this paint system is going to be efficient? We're not going to backtrack and have a spaghetti
Yeah.
diagram that is 15 miles long. Um, so we're really focused right now on bringing the paint system in this summer, getting we bought some new machining equipment. We have a new torch coming in, trying to get all that seamlessly so our process makes sense. So we're not adding more non-value activities on top of being short on people. So I think it's the same thing that a lot of manufacturers are facing nowadays. Um, and I'm sure you see it every day through your work too, is not enough people and too much work. So how do we deal with it? We're not going to have trained people that come up today that we can hire tomorrow. It just takes time to hire people. It takes time to train people. So how do we get there? How do we focus on making sure that everybody's working efficiently? That's what
Yeah.
we're really focused on this year.
That's awesome. And you know what I would say to that is I love what you said because, too often, especially when we start talking about where we're at today and, kind of pre-pandemic, post-pandemic and, looking for people, bringing people in, too often people are so focused on the, well, nobody's out there, nobody wants to work, kind of the woe is me. And I love your response because it really puts the focus back on process, making sure that you are, finding the right people and investing in those people. Like it gets back to what the real heart of lean is and why I love it so much. Why, if you look on, my LinkedIn profile, I've got a Deming quote there about, system and people. And it just speaks to all of that. And so I love that, you really are living this stuff. And that is like, to me, the coolest thing, because it's so easy to kind of jump on, well, nobody wants to work out there. Well, that's not quite true, right? Is it a challenge to find people? Yes. But what can we do internally? How can we, optimize what we are doing? And then, yes, we also need to find people and bring people in, but we're also, to me, this is like the perfect example how you can have a similar company to you that is really struggling to, not just achieve on the operational efficiency side, but they're probably going backwards on the sales revenue side as well. And, when I look at a company like yours saying these types of things right from a leadership position, and you're looking at things to bring back internally so you have additional controls on it, you're engaging the people to make sure that that's all part of that process and that planning aspect. So I really love that. And just know that you are in a different class in terms of how you're approaching the situation. And in the long term, your business is going to be the business that ends up surviving and thriving because of the things that you guys are doing on a day-to-day basis. So I absolutely love that. Sam, I know we're kind of winding down and out of time. Is there anything else that you would like to share when it comes to lean manufacturing? Anything about your journey or something that you just feel compelled to share with anybody that's in the audience today before we wrap?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is never stop learning. I mean, there's so many great books out there, LinkedIn, any place you can go to learn more. I think you and I talked before is that every day there's something new out there, and not that it's a new idea. TPS has been around for years and years, but there's always a different perspective, a way to look at things that maybe triggers something in your brain. I go to work, I've been there for 10 years, I see the same thing every day. Maybe it's just that one thing that I read that triggers, oh, there's a way better way to do this. Let's look at it. Let's investigate it as a group. Let's see if there's a way that we can make this better. And I think reading, listening to podcasts, I've listened to almost all of yours. Anything you can do to learn more and apply those on a daily basis. I have a 30-minute drive to work. So every day I'm listening to podcasts, instead of wasting my time listening to music, listen to podcasts, trying to learn more. I try to read, during my lunch hour, I'm reading a book. I'm not listening, going on Facebook and checking my friends' posts, whatever it is. So my recommendation to young engineers, old engineers, anybody who's working in any field really is never stop learning. That would be my advice.
Yeah, man, that's kind of priceless advice. And the other thing I would add to that thought is, it's the collective brain power of people. So make sure that when you get an opportunity to engage people, to, engage people that are close to the process, and also engage people that are a little bit further away, because it's that kind of, their genuine curiosity, right? It's back to that learning. It's that genuine curiosity that people that are not directly touching the process can bring into the mix. And again, just kind of fuel those changes and fuel that idea a little bit further. So Sam, man, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. If anybody wants to reach out to you directly, where's the best place that they could find you?
My LinkedIn profile is probably the easiest.
Perfect. And I'll make sure I'll link that into the show notes for everybody. So Sam, thanks again for coming on the Everyday Business Problems podcast. It's been a real pleasure, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening today. If we brought you any value, please rate, subscribe, and share our podcast. Also, be sure to connect with us on social media by searching @The Chrysler Club. Until next week, I'm your host, Dave Chrysler.